So first off, thanks everyone for joining. I know that there's so much that happens in the Fedora project, and a lot of it tends to be very technical. So I hope that I know that like tech stuff is nerdy, Linux stuff is nerdier, and we're gonna get up to like social media nerd stuff. All right, so I hope that you can, you'll have fun as we go through what this journey has been, as we walk through kind of how this initiative started and where we're at now. So a few things that I want to talk through. I want to cover what is Mastodon. I think most of us will know about this, especially if this is a talk that you were excited for. But I do want to cover that in general. How did our account come to be? Where are we at currently? And then most of the talk is going to be how do we actually run and manage the account? And then that sets the stage for what are future things that the marketing team may consider when it comes to our socials. So the first question, what is Mastodon? Like I said, I think most folks know, but plain and simple, it is a social network that's like Twitter, but it's decentralized and free and open source. I think a lot of discussion has gone on about like how social media works, how it's influenced society, how it's influenced all kinds of things. And we're at a point because of what happened with Twitter being purchased that a lot of people are asking, is there a better way? Is this an opportunity to do something differently? Mastodon was a free and open source project that had been waiting in the wings since 2016, and they've just been plugging away at developing a similar experience to Twitter, but featuring decentralization. So through that, you have the opportunity to have multiple communities who can have their own tweaks on how they view moderation, and they could also all communicate with each other on, all right, basically, who are we cool with, who are we maybe not so cool with, and you had more control over how you can make those decisions. And I'm biased, but personally, I think that's going to be a very helpful idea to explore through Mastodon and the rest of the Fediverse and ActivityPub. I'll highlight as well that Mastodon, while the most popular, is not the only thing in this decentralized sphere. It uses ActivityPub, and through that connects to what it's a bunch of other federated platforms, which everyone calls the Fediverse. So that's the deal there. The other thing that is especially attractive about Mastodon, which is also the case for other projects, is that it is free and open source. So obviously, with free and open source being such a foundational value for the Fedora project, that was something that we were very much interested in. However, it wasn't enough to put us over the hurdle until relatively recently. The person who we were working with a lot, who was working a lot on the marketing team before me, Edward, he was interested in Mastodon like a year before anything like this shook out. Primarily because it's like, oh, it's decentralized and it's free and open source. If we're going to be doing marketing, why don't we do marketing also with a free and open source platform? But there were some challenges there with Mastodon itself and issues about audience and what have you. So it really wasn't until Elon Musk bought Twitter that everyone was like, we have to do things. And I don't want to talk too much about that piece, but it did put a lot of eyes on other potential options as folks were looking for something else to fill that Twitter sized hole in our hearts. So we Mastodon was one of the main ones that were brought up. It had been brought up previously. It was suggested again. There was a lot of back and forth, as you can see from this thread that I have here on the side. 68 posts is not normal, but at the end we did make it. The goal was to just have at least a spot. It could be experimental, but the goal is at least it's here. Folks know where to find us. We can share details here. And it is at least a response to the community, because that's really what it was. Despite hesitation on like, what about this or that challenge for using the account, the community wanted it so bad that we're like, yeah, we're a community project. It is what it is. We're going to make an account. So that's more or less how the actual account started. It's a little small here, but the account actually started on December 13th of last year. And at the time, I think I ended up posting this little update on December 22nd. By then, we worked up to 1,700 followers, which is just because it's Fedora being like, "Hello, I'm here." So I don't credit that to any special marketing, but that's where we shut it off. Looking at where we're at now, we're at 6,605 followers in about 6 months. We do about 20 posts a month. So it'll usually be on a weekday that we'll do a post, and I don't count boosts in that because that's more as we're going through it. We'll see, hey, that was cool, or this is a really interesting thing from another corner of the project, or look at this, person working with Cericia, right? No one's talked about that yet, so we want to boost it. But I don't normally count that kind of thing. Another thing that I'll mention is this is from the marketing team. My background is like I got a marketing degree. I worked in sales a little bit, so I am. You got to do some competitive analysis, right? And so I am keeping an eye out on what are some of the other distro accounts that are out there. Right now, we are number 3. So props definitely to Elementary OS and Debian for having the top 2 spots. We had been slowly working our way up, so no one knows about this except for me, but I did have this like rivalry of like OpenSUSE, I'm coming for you. So they're a great account, and we're happy to boost and interact with them as well. So I'm very happy with where we're at now, but I do want to obviously grow more. I'll mention here that you will see other accounts for other projects that will have like 10,000, 20,000 followers. So I also think that what you're seeing here with these distro accounts is more or less, not the cap on like all the followers that we potentially could have, but there's not like some other OS out there, I don't think, that has like 20,000 followers that we're just not aware of. I do know about other accounts like the Ubuntu account, Manjaro, Linux Mint, Pop OS, but I didn't want to include all of them here. But if you know of other distro accounts, please let me know, because I want to be aware of just what everyone else is doing. A lot of them, like Elementary, I was inspired by them for our release post. So just let me know if there's maybe one that you think is not here, isn't like a major one, and I want to keep track of it. Anyway, that's where we are now. Oh, also I'll mention we are on Mastodon.org as we were exploring what are some potential instances to host on. We settled on this one because it seemed like it was just it had a good size, had a solid team behind it, and it just made sense for us to go there. But there are other options that we could have explored as well. How do we actually run the account? So as I was managing the account, I was thinking, I guess, what is our North Star? And then after that, I was just going through doing my best with managing the account. And from that, I kind of observed what are some things that I normally stick to, things that I try to keep in mind. And I highlight them as guidelines because I think that's going to be relevant for other socials down the line. So we'll cover those two. I'll bring up some examples, and I'll talk to my actual workflow, because I think that could be helpful for someone who, you're interested in doing social media for your open source project, but you're not sure how to get something out, or how that fits into your personal schedule, right? Especially if you're going to be a volunteer, right? I don't work for Red Hat. I work for like a totally unrelated company. So it's not even in the tech sector. So if you're a volunteer and you're not technical, but you want to help with marketing, and social media might be an option for you, I want to walk through what does my workflow look like and see if that's something that is helpful for you. Maybe you can adopt it yourself. Maybe you can pull out just the helpful ideas. So first thing, our North Star. This was something that was very important to me when we started posting from Fedora, because I knew that, first off, like the Fedora project, that brand, it means something. It's a distro that's been around for 20 years. It's super impactful. Downstream of Fedora is CentOS and RHEL, and now Rocky and Alma. It's important that the brand is treated with respect. There's also like the legal aspect too, of like, you need to be wise with what you're going to say. The other consideration was that the Fedora project, it's one account, but it is representing everyone that's in the community. So when I think about, all the different people who are here, all of our different opinions regarding all kinds of things, from, big important topics like, the importance of open source and freedom and independence for software, to like GNOME versus KDE, it would be silly. It would be foolish if the Fedora account was like, GNOME is so much better than KDE. Like, no, we're not going to do that, right? We have to respect the fact that there's a lot of people here who are representing more values and opinions than just whoever happens to be behind the account. So that was very important to me. And I think that the Friends Foundation, which I have quoted here, is a good representation of what our North Star is. It's got to stick to the Friends Foundation. We've got to be looking at everyone within the community and people in the Linux and open source community more broadly, and even outside of that. These are our friends. We want to be friendly. We want to be on good terms. We don't want to be communicating in a way that makes someone feel bad or misrepresented or what have you. I think that's kind of the main idea behind the tone for these posts. And then after that, the content can vary, but the tone should always stay in line with the Friends Foundation. At least in my opinion, that's kind of worked well for us so far. But then I do have, a few more kind of guidelines that I try to follow with myself. One important thing for me was that when we came to Mastodon, especially with the specific culture that Mastodon has, I wanted to make sure we came in respecting not just like the Linux and open source and Fedora communities, but also the Mastodon community. And what I didn't want was for the Fedora account to be just like, oh, we are the Fedora account and we're just going to, blast out information and just expect the people are going to be interested. I wanted to make sure that the Fedora account was a participant in the community just as much as any other account was, right? Just as other people are talking about, we're excited about this, we're interested in that. Here's an important thing that we want to make sure we're sharing. We wanted to be just one more participant rather than trying to like command attention in an unfair way. And I mentioned that because that affects how we post about things, right? When you think about having to participate with the community, you want to make sure that every post you do is something that someone would actually be interested in, that they would find value in, and you don't just post like a headline with a link and just expect, the folks are going to be interested in what you have to say. You have to engage. Another piece that I try to follow is kind of, I think the second point is the main idea behind how I choose what we post and what have you. So I think a lot of it, not as content production, but content curation. So I'm looking at it. There's all this content about Fedora. What is good content that we can post? How often do we want to be posting that? And how do I keep a variety between the types of posts that we have? So what does that look like? For the types of content, it could be things like from the Fedora magazine or from the community blog. But sometimes I'll see that someone posted a YouTube video about Fedora. It was about a cool niche thing. Sometimes I'll see, a clear example from me is when Carl George brought over his thread explaining the relationship between Fedora, CentOS, and RHEL. And so I'm like, yeah, boost, because that was a great explanation. So I want to make sure that the quality is good and something that's going to be valuable, right? I want you to feel like if you're following the Fedora account, it actually brings value to you. And if the Fedora account went quiet, that you would miss it. And so that means that we're not, that, if you're posting spam, no one's going to miss that. But if it is something that you're happy to have, something that you're happy to follow, that means it's good content that we're pushing out. I also wanted to watch flow. As I don't want to be posting too infrequently because I feel like that's maybe a waste of, the opportunity that we have. But I also don't want to be posting too much. So I try to hem that in, and that's why I try to do just like once a day, trying to keep it to a time when I think that folks in Europe and folks in North, like on both sides of the hemisphere, as much as I can, I try to keep that in mind. I do think I have work to do there to diversify a little more. And then for the variety of posts, I'm trying to keep in mind, what is like a high level important thing, like, hey, here is, we have Fedora elections, that's important for the project. But then I also want to talk about, hey, here's like RPM Sequoia. Here's a cool new thing that we implemented. Here's just a general announcement about Fedora 38 being out. And so there's more non-technical things like, hey, here's the design team, here's something that they're doing, or here's the Creative Freedom Summit, which, by the way, there's the open source art challenge. You don't have to be good at it, you can still participate. Just draw something in Krita. I'll just give a quick shout out for that. So the idea is it shouldn't all just be like technical or non-technical. We want to have a good mix. How I can't give more than that. I feel like, especially if you're thinking about this for your own project, you kind of just have to get a feel, but you just want to be aware that you have lots of different folks potentially following your account, and you just want to know your audience to know what mix of posts you want to surface. And then besides that, I was just looking out for other things that I may want to post about. So sometimes we'll have a little more fun, but still want to engage. So I put this example here, this poll where I did have an actual interest in like, how do folks understand the governance? But I also wanted to give it funny out. So, and then folks enjoy that. So we also just want to have fun with it, I'll have a few examples here of things that we did that I think were successful. So starting from the first to the latest, we had the Create and Freedom Summit. I know a lot of folks have heard about this, so I won't go into too much more detail because we had a whole retrospective earlier in the release party. But that was one of the first campaign type things that we were able to explore with the Mastodon account. We knew this was coming, so we had to drum up hype. How do you drum up hype? Well, by having frequent posts. But how do you not bombard people with posts? You try to have creative repetition. And so we were talking about like, hey, here's this thing. Hey, here's this speaker that we're going to have. Hey, we're going to have like a cool, so, we tried to mix up different ways of mentioning that the Creative Freedom Summit was coming so that you got the hint, right? It was a reminder for you, but it didn't feel like spam because you at least were learning new things about what was going on. And as the team shared earlier, Mastodon was a big part of, a lot of the folks who showed up at the Creative Freedom Summit did come from Mastodon, which is crazy considering this was like in January or so. So it's not even like we were super big, but we were able to make that work. Another example I have here is for Unfiltered FlatHub. This is one where this is when you're paying attention to what's happening in the project, you can catch something. And if you know what your audience is thinking and you know what is going on in the project, sometimes you can find things where you just know we got to talk about it. When I saw that we were going to make the change so that we didn't have to filter FlatHub anymore and just have all of FlatHub available if you enabled third-party repositories, I looked around like, has no one reported on this yet? Has no one talked about where's OMG Linux? Like, have they talked about this? And it seems like they hadn't. And I knew I had to I'm grabbing this and posting this right now. And if you were, not that I don't expect anyone to, but if you scroll back, you'll see that was a pretty successful post on Mastodon. That wasn't anything that I did particularly. I wasn't the one implementing the change, but I did know that a lot of people was a common complaint that why is FlatHub unfiltered? Now I have to go and download something separately or do something in the terminal. I knew it was going to be a very well-received change, and I capitalized on that opportunity. So that's an example of just being aware of what's happening in your project, because if something's exciting is around the corner, that's your chance to grab that and let people know, and then you're going to see, positive engagement on that account. The latest example I'll give is for the Fedora 38 release, which is very exciting. I'm going to give props again to the Elementary OS team because I was actually inspired by them. You would expect normally it's like, hey, there's a new release. Here is the post saying it is available. Go and download the release. But Elementary OS actually had that initial post and then followed it up with back-to-back posts on different things that were new in their update. And I thought that was awesome because you have, man, I don't want to nerd out too much, but it's almost like you're giving people a little pamphlet they can share, right? If someone clicks on, if you boost any one of those posts, because it's a thread, now everyone is going to get the whole thread potentially, so they can just quickly scroll there. You're pulling out details that would have been hidden in a blog post that someone might not read, a detail that maybe they would be interested in sharing if they knew about it, but in order to do that, you have to separate it out. So it was really smart. We took that and expanded on it by, instead of having all the posts back to back, having all the posts spread out over the course of multiple days. So especially because Mastodon doesn't have an algorithm, timing is very important in my opinion on Mastodon. So we wanted to make sure that we caught you. Maybe we caught some people during their lunch, and yeah, the first post is gonna get a lot of boost because it's for the initial release. But then we come back in the afternoon with bam, here's the one about Workstation, and then another one about Budgie, and then about Sway at different times of the day. So you still have that little nice pamphlet in the form of this thread, but now you're catching more people and you're taking advantage of the hype. And some people might say oh, that's kind of cringe. I would say this is what Fedora does, just like during events, I'm going to be, live posting about the events for the release. You're going to get a lot of posts about the release. But I don't think everyone kind of understood that. And what you saw there was, instead of having just one post that had a lot of engagement, you saw several posts that had a lot of engagement. And that engagement tapered off as you go through. If you want to pull it up, I think I might actually have it in an example here. Here's the Mastodon post to the right. That post did get a lot of engagement, but the workstation post and the budget post after that, it got a lot of engagement on the coattails of the first one. And that's something where if I did, a post about here's the release, and then afterwards I'm like, and here's just a magazine article about something else, uh, you don't have that synergy. You don't get to share that excitement. You don't get to, draw out how awesome and cool and new the release is. So that was, I think, the latest example, and I think that we saw some success with that. So if you want to go, if anyone's curious, here's the first post, and if you click on it, you'll see the thread, and you'll see that there was engagement on other posts that I don't know if we would have had if we, didn't make a big deal about individual changes. So that's that. I think hopefully we'll have other examples. I can think of like FOSDEM, for example, where we had a few posts leading up to FOSDEM. And I'll mention for folks in the Fedora project, if you have something that's coming up, these are the kinds of things that we can do to help drum up interest or hype around something. It's got to make sense, but you got what I'm saying? Like we're able to do things. It's not just, oh yeah, can you just like post and then it's like, here's a link and we can move on. There's a lot of opportunity here. Okay. I'll mention this Twitterverse Mastodon because this is something I am excited about. I wanted to do a much deeper dive into the numbers, but I couldn't because I was feeling a little sick toward the back half of the week. But I did think this was a good recent example of what we're talking about. So here we have the Twitter post announcing the release to the left and the Mastodon post announcing the release to the right. Obviously, the content is different. You can see that. But I'm not going to credit the content too much because that hasn't been my experience for other types of posts. I do want to highlight, look at how many retweets versus how many boosts the Mastodon post has. So you have Twitter got 333 retweets, and this is something that I took a screenshot of. This was this morning. Mastodon got 331 boosts, almost the same amount of boosts. That's crazy. Like that engagement is the parity is insane. If you look at the likes, Mastodon got 355 likes, whereas Twitter got 1,216 likes. Obviously, a lot more likes than what Mastodon has, but still, Mastodon got a third of the likes of what Twitter got, which is still like very crazy number. Like that's insane. I do think there's a reason for some difference where Mastodon, everyone knows that boosting is the way that it's going to get around. So there is that priority for boosting. Whereas on Twitter, everyone knows that, yes, you can retweet, but also a like will give it a bump in the algorithm. So, that's why I think you see that, the way that it's skewed there. Typically, you want more boosts on Mastodon. But what I'm saying with this is very comparable. It's extremely comparable. And it's highlighted even more so by the next fact, which is look at how many followers we have on each platform. About 6,000 followers or 7,000 followers on Mastodon versus 184,000 on Twitter. That's 4%. Mastodon just has 4% of the followers on Twitter, and we have comparable engagement. That's insane. Like I know people talk about that, and if you're really into Mastodon, you'll see other posts talking about that from other popular figures comparing their stats. So, in some respects, we're not different, and I do think there are a lot of caveats to keep in mind, which I won't go into for the sake of time. But this is still insane. And one of the clearer things that I take away from this is that the engagement and the enthusiasm for our Mastodon users is just blows Twitter out of the water. Like it is just insane how much more enthusiasm there is, and that may be a factor for someone who's thinking about their social media strategy. Maybe Mastodon isn't like the only place where you're posting. Maybe it's not the primary place where you're posting or giving your attention. But when you're trying to identify who are like your key demographics, who are the people who care about what you do the most, Mastodon, depending on your field, right? Like I'll mention this. It makes a lot of sense that Fedora is seeing this as success, but if you're into wrestling, for example, and if you're into WWE, you will notice that community has not migrated over, right? So that's one of the caveats that I'll mention. But depending on the industry you're in, some of your most passionate users may be on Mastodon, and you don't want to be ignoring them because they're the ones who are going to get your word out. They're the ones who are going to boost your posts and your announcements. Basically, like Mastodon is punching way above its weight class. And so I hope I've emphasized that enough. Like Mastodon has so much opportunity for growth, and that's something that I want to continue to explore from the marketing team perspective. So I'll go through this quickly. What is my workflow? First point being gathering content from different sources. I mentioned this, but primarily I'll be pulling stuff from the Fedora magazine, the community blog. So it'll be a lot of starring stuff. I have a little folder on my browser, and that's my backlog of content to post. I'll also see what other people are just posting on Mastodon in general, and sometimes I'll pull that out to post myself later. Sometimes I'll just boost that. And then also, I am a member of the Fedora project, right? So I'm looking at Fedora discussion. I'm trying to watch more and more what's happening in the change log so that I can just independently grab that content and push it out. But part of that is just comes from kind of wallowing in the project. Then for actually posting, I'll have my lunch break. It takes me like 20 to 30 minutes because I have my little backlog. So I just sit down. Maybe I'll look at, okay, well, what mentions have we gotten? I'll look through our timeline, and then I'll see, okay, well, what article makes the best sense for now? If maybe I've posted a lot of technical stuff for a little bit, let me put something that's non-technical. If it's the reverse, I'll put something technical, right? So I'll watch what has been coming. But besides that, I already have my backlog. I just post about it, try to give you, a nice hook with the actual post, right? So I'm not just going to give you the headline and a link and move on. The Mastodon account is on an RSS feed. But I will try to hook you with like, hey, here's an article, and here's like the cool reason why you might want to read it, or at least a cool reason why you might want to share it. And then we just go from there, and that's what we do. And I do that every lunch. So I don't do it on the weekends because I found that, well, one, I need a break, and two, seems like weekend posts didn't do as well as weekday posts. So I figured, hey, if we're doing about 20 posts a month, that's great. I'll also mention that, but let me check my time to see how we're doing. Oh, no. We're kind of over, but anyway, that's basically the workflow, and you can try to work with that. I'll mention here where to go from here, just my opinion. Basically, this whole process that I described is what I think that we may be wanting to do for the other social medias, and I can share more about that maybe if we have questions. Thank you. Sorry about that.